Well, now let's talk about what's available domestic. That's about real estate funding right here in Nigeria. And we have joining us to discuss this from our Abuja studio, the Managing Director of Shelter Afrique Development Fund, Mr. Theono Habib Han. Mr. Han, good afternoon, and thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so we know
Thank
that...
you for having me.
Great. So we know that talking about Shelter Afrique, Nigeria's government is also part owners of dates. Nigeria's total paid up capital subscription to Shelter Afrique is about 30.7 million. The Nigerian committed to do 29.3 million subscription. Where are we with that? Talking about the engagement or commitment of the federal government of Nigeria, and what does it make available to Nigerians?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and pleasure to be here today in Nigeria. This is part of our one-week mission to really engage with the government of Nigeria, which is one of our largest shareholders, with 15% of Shelter Afrique Development Bank, formerly known as Shelter Afrique, because we underwent a major transformation of the institution since I came on board a year ago. We have a whole new set of statutes that have been reforming the institution from the ground up, and Nigeria has been really at the forefront of this transformation with the Honorable Minister of Housing and Urban Development, Architect Dangiwa, who has been and still is the chair of the Shareholders Bureau of Shelter Afrique Development Bank. In October in Algeria, we were able to transform the institution into a development bank to make sure that we achieve the targets of affordable housing across the continent. So Nigeria has historically been one of the largest shareholders, as I explained, and today with the engagement with the Minister of Housing, Minister of Finance, the Central Bank Governor, all the way to His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, there is a commitment to increase the participation of Nigeria into Shelter Afrique's Development Bank shareholding, and we're looking forward to conclude that.
So what does Nigeria's ownership in Shelter Afrique, what opportunities does it open up to Nigeria and Nigerians?
So the opportunities are tremendous. Shelter Afrique Development Bank works across the value chain of affordable housing. So we tackle issues related to land development, land ownership, all the way to the construction, materials, financing, and also financing developers and financing the mortgages. So we are working across the value chain in Nigeria, working with the private sector, the public sector, to really drive access to affordable housing in Nigeria. For instance, Shelter Afrique Development Bank has issued in the past 2 years 46 billion nairas in the capital markets in local currency to fund the housing development and mortgages in Nigeria. And this is part of our 200 billion naira program, which is a medium-term note MTN program to finance affordable housing. So Shelter Afrique is fully involved in the spectrum of the development finance institutions in Nigeria, and we'll be doing more of that. So the goal for us is to facilitate access to decent, affordable, and sustainable housing for the population.
So when you say affordable housing, I mean, that word really catches a lot of attention, but are there ways that individual Nigerians can access this, or do they have to go through government institutions?
So there are several ways to benefit from Shelter Afrique Development Bank. So as I said, it's through the private sector, either financial institutions that we fund, and the financial institutions would finance either developers to build affordable housing or mortgages through individuals and households to finance the acquisition of the homes. And then we also finance developers directly so that developers can build those homes in a manner that's affordable and accessible to the masses. And we work with government agencies and the government itself through PPPs, public-private partnership, where the government and the agencies or the states provide access to land, affordable land, and we, Shelter Afrique, will structure the PPP in such a way that we can mobilize developers that can deliver large-scale affordable housing, but also we mobilize the funding to finance those initiatives. So all in all, we are really a wholesale development finance institution that makes it enable the sector really to address the housing crisis, and the final beneficiaries, obviously, are the Nigerian populations.
Yeah, we know affordable is an interesting word because I know it means different things to different people. But at a time when, I mean, we've been talking about the cost of cement in Nigeria, as well as other building materials, how do you then get affordable homes? Or I guess it would be, how do you define affordable homes to Nigerians who are in different levels of economic status?
That's an excellent question. Affordability is a very relative term. Depending on the market where we operate, there are different levels of affordability. And obviously, affordability is it depends on different inputs, right? So we have to look at the cost of the home that's being built, the cost of construction materials, and then the cost of financing, and the level of income of the populations. And we put all that together and we come up with an affordability index. And Shelter Afrique Development Bank has actually designed this affordability index to be consistent across the markets where we operate. And this allows us to define what affordability means depending on the market where we operate. So you are absolutely right. Affordability is a relative term, and we need to really make sure that it's customized to the market where we operate. And this is exactly why we have this affordability index calculation at Shelter Afrique Development Bank, which drives really the way we operate in the different markets. Because our objective is to really address the masses, the population that doesn't have access to financing, access to those decent homes, to make housing really a democratic sort of consumer goods, and make sure that actually everybody can get access to decent and affordable homes across the continent.
Yeah, well, finally, just before we let you go, I mean, you talked about democratic, you talk about everybody, and back here in Nigeria, we look at the rural areas as where you don't really have the purchasing power. Is there any funding that is intentionally channeled towards housing in the rural areas?
Absolutely. Shelter Afrique Development Bank is not only looking at the urban areas, so we really have to tackle the issue of urban versus rural. And definitely we are also in discussions with the government here in Nigeria and in our other 43 countries where we operate. We have 44 shareholders, 44 countries that are shareholders and members of Shelter Afrique, also African Development Bank and Africa Re. And here in Nigeria specifically, we've been in discussion with the government this week. We met the Vice President, Honorable Vice President of the Republic, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who's been very supportive with the Pulako Resettlement Initiative in the northern part of Nigeria, in different rural areas, where Shelter Afrique Development Bank will also collaborate. And this is a very welcome initiative from His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Nigeria. And we, as Shelter Afrique, will be accompanying the government. We're part of the steering committee, by the way, in the Vice President's office, to really drive this agenda. So rural is really key to address the crisis of housing across the continent. It's not only about urban. So we have to make sure that individuals can be attracted to stay in the rural areas. And this will be in conjunction with the other priorities of the government, developing the agricultural sector, and making sure that people get a decent life in the rural areas so that we can reduce the pressure on the cities. So it's part of our integrated approach to address the housing crisis across the continent.
Thank you so much. We do wish you the best and more homes, more affordable homes, I should add, in Nigeria and across the continent. Mr. Fenu Habibhan, the Managing Director of Shelter Afrique Development Bank, for your time.
Thank you so much and appreciate. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Welcome.